Welcome to episode 4 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart. This episode was taped July 5th and will be presented in 4 parts. You are listening to part 4.
It's similar to Muhammad Ali's career. As a boxer, he was hugely popular amongst his own people, of course, because his rhetoric and the fact that he was beating up white guys. But mostly who Muhammad Ali beat up were very dark-skinned, scary-looking black men, guys like Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier. George Foreman wasn't so dark-skinned, but he was a big hawking guy. Ron Lyle, and he would have Ernie Shavers. He would have demeaning names for these guys, like calling Joe Frazier a gorilla. And he was out there looking half white. He had very white Caucasian facial features. If you go back and look at pictures of him before he got old, he was from a house servant family in Kentucky. Joe Frazier was descended from Maroons, escaped slaves, guys that escaped as soon as they got off the boat. And went out in the marshlands and started their own community and said, come and get us, okay?
I wanted to ask you about that, too. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
So what I think Muhammad Ali was so popular with people like Howard Cosell because he looked more white than he looked like the guys he was beating up. He was calling these guys racist names that a white man couldn't really get away with saying, and he's beating them up. And he's making money for the white man all the time and selling his products. So I actually think there was a huge orgy of proxy violence there where he was really the agent of these sissy white men. If you talk to men my age and older, white men that were really big fans of Muhammad Ali, these are guys that were afraid of black men.
Yeah.
But they weren't afraid of him. He was their guy.
Well, and
he did shit with the Beatles.
It's part of boxing, though, the proxy violence, and you've mentioned that before, that you identify more with your opponent than you do with the viewers or the audience.
Oh, yeah.
And so it has to be an element always. And
that's why that hurt Joe Frazier so bad.
Yeah.
Because he considered Ali his friend. He gave Ali money when he couldn't work because of the Vietnam thing. And Ali turned around and stabbed him in the belly on national TV.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I cut you off again.
No.
The patriarchy was accidentally asserting itself.
This is the James LaFond podcast, the Crackpot podcast. It's not the Lynn podcast. It's the James. Okay. Well, and you mentioned that he was from a Maroon community, and it just made me think of Justice Clarence Thomas, because Clarence Thomas...
Dark-skinned guy.
What's that?
Dark-skinned guy.
Yeah, and Clarence Thomas was part of the Gullah, or Geechee community in Georgia and South Carolina. I think he came from South Carolina. Is that something like that? Is that a Maroon?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's what we're talking about. There were some near the site of Richmond, Virginia, in the 1600s. There was about 100 of them. They helped Nathaniel Bacon in his rebellion against the landowners in Virginia, where you had black guys and white guys teaming up fighting white guys and black guys who were slave owners. You actually had black guys owning white slaves up until that period.
Wow.
The laws against them owning white slaves weren't passed till the eve of that rebellion. So, and with the Seminole Indians, this was an American Indian culture, but Seminole is derived from Cimarron, the Spanish term they used for runaway. Oh. So these were originally runaway slaves that lived with the Indians. Then you got a bunch of runaway Anglo slaves that teamed up with them. I've got a picture in this book. The American Revolution in India Country, Crisis and Diversity in Native American Communities. This is a very liberal book. They've got a picture in here of one of the first chiefs of the Seminoles, who's obviously an Irish guy. And then 75 years later, Billy Bowlegs, who's black as the ace of spades, is given 50 slaves, black slaves, by the U.S. government to move to Oklahoma because they can't find him and kill him. The Seminoles were never defeated, and they were never really Indians. There was a little bit of Indian blood in there, but first they get washed out by the white influx, and then and then you start getting a lot of black guys coming into it when they switched to predominantly black slavery.
It's almost like a Caribbean model of mixing the locals and the blacks and the.
You had Cimarrones in Panama that teamed up with the pirate admiral from Port Royal, Jamaica, when they went into Panama, and they won that fight over the Spanish there.
Well, I admire.
Morgan did that. So, and those were also mixed white, Indian, black runaways.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to say I admired Clarence Thomas because he gets a lot of hate from liberals, but he grew up speaking this Creole language, Geechee, in South Carolina. He went to segregated schools, and he went to a segregated high school where he learned Latin. And it just blows my mind that in his time, you could have a segregated high school, where the black students were being taught at that level, compared to today when there's no public high school that teaches Latin.
Clarence Thomas, in my opinion, is hated by liberals, by white liberals and black liberals, because he's black.
Yeah.
Most of the black liberals are mulattoes, quadroons, octoroons. I watched this one documentary on slavery, and I'm sitting there with AJ, my roommate, who's part white, part American Indian, and part black, but she's at least mostly more than 50% of African descent. And I keep saying, they finally put a white scholar on here. Every new historian they dug up to speak on slavery in this PBS documentary, one looked whiter than the other one. This one had this beautiful pasty pale skin, and she was a redhead. And she's like, nope, she's black. Nope, she's black.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you serious? She said, there's not a single black historian on here. And she's up on black politics and culture, and she knows.
Yeah.
These are all people that are identified as black, but they look white.
Well, and
these are the people that hate dark-skinned black people.
It was a huge part of the Obama administration. You had this Eric Holder, who, his kids are blonde, and
yeah, I know Italians that have darker skin than him.
Yeah, I do in the summer. I can't pass the paper bag test if I'm not careful with the sunscreen.
Actually, AJ's mother belonged to a paper bag fraternity.
Oh, really?
She barely made it into the paper bag. There was two black fraternities in the Virginia college she went to, and she barely made it into the later than a paper bag.
Nice. This sorority, I guess, probably would.
Right, sorority. I'm sorry.
No. I don't want to disrespect AJ's mother.
A fraternity of sisters.
Yeah. Right. Well, James, I think I'm going to end our talk for today. I think we probably
Did we ever hit the topic?
We did. Definitely.
Sorry.
And we can always come back. But as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you. It's same here.
Thank you for listening to part 4 of episode 4 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Len Lockhart.